Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. We've got people online as well. And I'm Constance Prenier, and I help facilitate these programs. So really glad to be here. And I really want to thank Kendall for being our tech wizard. This could not happen without her. So just a reminder that we welcome questions. We also have people online asking questions. So what I'll ask is that as those of you who are in the room have a question, if you'll ask one, and then we'll move on to other people and bring in the questions from online as well. And if we have time, you'll be able to ask a second question. So thank you for that. I am really pleased to introduce Deputy Mayor Betsy Robertson. And are you ready?
Sure.
Great. And you've got a mic. Great.
I've got a mic. Yeah. Hi. It's so nice to be here. This is my first time attending CityLearn, and I'm delighted. I know it's in its early stages and evolving, but it's certainly fun to see you guys in person. I've seen you on Zoom here for the last few years. So that's fun to be here. Thanks for having me. I have 2 items that have been prepared for me to bring to you today for discussion. And then they don't even know this. I'm going to go rogue a little bit and go talk about a third that's on my mind. So first one is urban forestry. All right. So over the next 5 years, city is going to invest $3.76 million in its urban forestry efforts. The funding comes from a $1 million grant from the U.S. Forest Service, and then 2.76 in matching funds from the city. Those funds are going to be used to expand our efforts to actively track the progress and health of our urban forests and tree canopy, and prioritize street tree planting in low canopy neighborhoods. We want to expand opportunities for the community to plant and maintain trees on private property. Does anybody know anybody who's taken advantage of that yet? Not in the room, maybe online. Do people have the opportunity to raise their hands and engage online? They do. Okay, great. And expand the Green Shoreline Partnership to provide urban forestry education, stewardship, and explore the creation of a workforce development initiative in partnership with local schools and community-based organizations. That will also include tree planting in areas with environmental health disparities. So maintaining and protecting our urban forest is essential to creating a healthy community. This money will allow us to make significant investments in our urban forestry program and help us to address Goal 2, Strategy 1 of our Climate Action Plan, which is to maintain and increase tree canopy and urban forest health. This project will allow for a significant amount of tree planting on both private and public property. And a big part of our tree planting efforts will be in planting strategically so as to increase the tree canopy in areas where it is currently lacking and very intentionally help reduce the heat island impacts. Any questions on urban forestry? Oh, I guess I'll move on. I think we'll do questions later.
The private property is part of that.
Yes, well, to a point. There is.
Would you mind repeating the question for Zoom participants?
The question is to learn more about the opportunity to plant trees on private property. The city does have a certain number of trees, or I think that's how they have, is it a number of trees that we have made available that if people can put in and apply for, call up and ask about. There's going to be information about it on the Shoreline webpage, but trees are available for people to plant on their property. And it's a great way. I mean, we don't have to solely build up the urban canopy on public lands, right? Private landowners who are passionate about this cause and expanding the canopy can really make an effort, whether it's on your own, talk to your neighbor, let them know about the program, get the word out. Okay. Well, I'll move on to, as I think everybody in this room knows, that I love talking about parks, and parkland acquisitions is the next topic for discussion. So by 2035, we expect Shoreline to grow by more than 15,000 new residents. That's a lot. 75% of that growth is going to occur in the light rail station areas. So one of the ways that we measure, the amount of parkland we need is we want to maintain level of service. The current level of service in Shoreline, based on our population and the amount of parkland we have, is 7.3 acres per 1,000 residents. So as we grow, we want the parkland to grow as well, so that we are maintaining that level of service. That means 95 additional acres of parkland by 2035, with 43% of that being in light rail station areas. So that's ambitious. Maybe some have said impossible to find 95 acres in the city of Shoreline, but that's a target, right? That's our goal. We don't have much open land in Shoreline, so we're going to take advantage of opportunities as they arise. And over the past 5 years, we have acquired almost 5 acres of new parkland, primarily by purchasing property that's residential property that is already close to existing parks as they become available. All of these purchases have been willing sellers. The city has no intention of using eminent domain powers to acquire park property. So as property becomes available on the market, if it makes sense to purchase it to further expand a nearby park and funds are available, then we take a look at it. Some of these recent purchases have been around Twin Ponds, Ronald Bog, and Rotary Park. The money to purchase these properties has primarily come from park impact fees, which developers pay as part of the permitting process for multifamily housing, and King County Conservation Future Tax Grants. And these are available for the conservation and restoration of natural areas. Even if we don't have immediate plans to redevelop new acquisitions into park space, it is important that we take advantage of purchasing property now, as we all expect it to get more expensive in the future. Any questions on parkland acquisitions? Yes.
I heard that there was a kind of a goal to provide park space within a quarter mile of every resident in Shoreline. Is that one of the goals?
I don't know if that is, if providing parkland within a quarter mile of every resident in Shoreline is a stated goal. That's very specific, and I just don't have that on top of my head. But what we do look at very directly are like walk sheds. How long would it take any individual to walk safely to a nearby park, to be able to access green spaces? So we have heat maps. This is something that the Parks Board is looking at very, very in a lot of detail through the PROSA plan that they're going through right now. That's one of the many heat maps that they overlay with each other to determine the highest needs areas and where there are sort of like park deserts, so to speak, and where we want to try to focus on acquiring new land. Does that make sense to you? Does that, okay. Patty?
Just to backtrack, city website, the street tree program, or not street tree, the tree program where you could get a tree and plant it on your own property, that closed August 15th. So I don't know how successful it is. That's not reported, but that program is apparently closed.
I think Bethany has something to add to that, because I know this won't be the only opportunity.
This is the second year of the program. I'm sorry, I'll introduce myself. My name is Bethany Warburg-Dunn, and I have the fortune of working with Constance and other colleagues in community services division. One of those programs within our division is environmental services, which includes both solid waste and climate action plan related items. And I know Deputy Mayor referred to a couple of actions that are in our current climate action plan. That Community Trees program, this is the second year. Last year was a pilot program. It was very successful. Folks had to apply and be committed to coming to a training over at Hamlin Park. We worked very closely with our park staff and the arborists that we have here at the city of Shoreline, because we're giving away trees. We want to make sure that they are fruitful where they land. We also provided aftercare instructions. This year we did expand it, and those trainings are happening this month. So you are correct when it did close August, because there is a good time of year to plant. And again, we want to encourage that these trees that are being planted in private property have a chance to have a pun, but to take root and to grow into tall, beautiful trees. Thank you for letting me butt in.
No, thank you. Great question. Great to phone a friend and get immediate detailed responses. Okay, are there questions online that we need to address before we move on? No. Okay, so this is where I'm going rogue, and I think I've got 10 minutes, so I don't think it'll take that long. This is something that's on my mind a lot as one of your elected representatives. And I remember, quick story, all the way back it was spring of 2016. I was a part of an organization called Seattle City Club. And we had Chuck Todd, moderator of Meet the Press, come to Seattle and speak at a luncheon. I was front table eating it up. I just love it. I was a journalist. I was, anyway, I loved it. Huge fan of Meet the Press. Anyway, he asked this room full of hundreds of civically engaged business leaders in downtown Seattle, has anyone ever thought of running for office? Crickets. And I even remember at the time, I was kind of like, ooh, and then I looked around and was like, wait a minute, no, that's not the norm in this room. And I don't want to be the one to raise my hand high. And I also, in the months, years ahead, really struggled with the idea. It's like, I wanted to be involved, but I didn't want the title of being a politician. So I wanted to just ask this room, has anyone ever considered running for office? And you ran. Did you run?
No.
Yeah. That's right. Okay. So I say this because I just feel like I'm in a room now with individuals that I know are very passionate about our community. And you have networks, and there are people online who are also very passionate about our community. And it bothers me that we have so many people running unopposed in our community. It really bothers me. And I'm going to just say this and speak out of both sides of my mouth, because I'm one of those that is right now running unopposed. I briefly had an opponent during filing week, and they withdrew after we had a conversation on the phone, but they withdrew. No, it was very nice. It was a very cordial conversation. And we had a beer afterwards. So I guess my point is, if you look at the map right now, whatever happens with this upcoming election, 6 out of the 7 council members in their seats will be there without being challenged. 6 out of 7. And by my calculations, I think it will also be 3 out of the 5 school board members. I just don't think that's okay. I don't think that's healthy for our community. I don't think that's healthy for democracy. I think people should have to talk about their ideas and their beliefs and earn those positions and earn your votes. So I just want to keep spreading that message out and spreading it as far as I can. And I hope that we start to see people raising their hands to get involved, to do the hard work, to run for office. And you may say that, hey, you may look up here and say, I love my representation. I love the direction the city is going. And that's great, but I have a hard time believing that the community like feels that way across the board. So how do we get more people involved, right? How do we do it? I think I look at CityLearn as one of those ways to start to educate and demystify the process of being involved in city government. And we have to have it. We have to have people willing to raise their hands. So help us with your networks, with your communities, start planting the seeds. And in another less than 2 years, about a year and a half, people are they're gonna be 4 seats open. That's 4 opportunities to run. And it's not personal. It's just, let's talk about what's important and what we want and how we want to be represented. And then the year after that, there'll be 3 more. And this is the cycle that we go through. So if you're listening online, if you're watching the recording later, please just give that some thought. Talk about it in your neighborhoods, at church, the coffee shop. Get people thinking about it. It takes time. It takes time to put it together. And I want to offer myself up as somebody who's willing to share about my experience, and encourage and just tell you what it would be like to go through that process yourself. So that's it. That's my soapbox, what I wanted to say. And if I have the chance to come back to CityLearn, I hope it's more and more people attending. And it's my intention to ask that question every time and see if we can't get a few more new hands in the air. Any questions? And now, stormwater. I could show.
No, I don't want to be on this. I want to see who's logged in.
Right. We should see it on the.
12, but half of them are in this room. Yeah. Oh, and I brought my good stuff. Okay, all right. Yeah. All right.
Okay. We will move to stormwater here. It is my pleasure to introduce my colleague who works in an adjacent cubicle. This is Christy Lovelace, and she is going to tell you about everything stormwater related and how you can get involved. So welcome. And we have John Featherstone, who is actually head of Christy's department, who will be answering questions both in person and online. So welcome.
All right. Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you, Betsy, as well. Really great words about demystifying city government right through these meetings. That's really what we're attempting to do here today. So thank you for that intro. Really appreciate it. So Christy Lovelace, here with the Surface Water Utility, and John Featherstone, Surface Water Utility Manager. And we're really excited to share about the Surface Water Utility, why we've got one, the work that we do, and also talk more about this planning process that we're going through right now. So we're attempting to demystify this planning process and really work with community members to help build a plan of what our work will look like over the next 6 years. So what will be our priority projects and what will be our priority programs. And as we go through this presentation, I really hope to get you excited about the work that we do. I think we have so many wonderful benefits that our work can bring in the projects that we do in the community to really help Shoreline become an even better place to live, work, and play. So I'm excited to dive into it. So first off, we're working in the rainwater business. So just a question for everyone, and feel free if you are joining us online to plug this into the chat. We'll read out some of the answers, but here in the room, just go ahead if you'd like to shout out your response. But you look outside, you see it's raining a lot. What is the first thing that you think? A positive. I love a positive start. Yes. Yep. Yeah, I think that one. Yes. Not flooding. Yeah. Yes. Do we have any responses coming in hot from the chat? Okay, they're probably thinking all of the same things, right? So really the spectrum of positive things, right? We need rainwater. It's great not to have to go out and water our garden, but also for some people, it can be a really serious issue, right? That flooding that comes off of the street, is my basement going to flood again, right? What's going to happen? And so here at the Surface Water Utility, our team works on 2 rainwater problems. First off, we work to reduce flooding and those large pools of water that can gather in the roadway or can also flow off of roadway onto people's private property. This is a really important area. I think it's also important, just a little context. You all, I think, have lived here for a while. I don't know who's on the online right now. But here in the Puget Sound area, right, we don't get these big flooding events like we see in the Southwest where we have cars underwater. That would be a very massive storm here, but we get a lot of water, right? And there's lots of opportunities for flooding to occur. So this is what we work on. We also work to reduce pollution that can travel by rainwater into streams, lakes, and Puget Sound through storm drains and through ditches. When we do this work, reducing flooding and reducing pollution, it also creates opportunities to do other really great things for our city. It can make shoreline greener by planting trees and gardens that soak up that rainwater. It can help to create or improve on community spaces that we have throughout the city. And it can also help Shoreline prepare for climate change, so preparing for those more intense storms that we're going to see with climate change, and also helping to fight climate change. When we're planting those trees and those gardens that are helping to soak up rainwater, they're also helping to soak up carbon dioxide, which is the major greenhouse gas driving climate change. And so tonight, sorry, I've got a little meeting note on here on my screen. But so tonight, I'm going to provide you with some background on the surface water utility. So what's our purpose? A little bit more into what programs do we have? What do we do? What do our projects look like? Maybe you've seen them throughout the community, hopefully. And the goal of this is really to get everybody onto the same page so we can start having a conversation about what our priorities should be when we go into this planning process, this surface water master plan, and we're looking to create a plan for the next 6 years. And I'll also share opportunities to participate in this planning process outside, of course, of this meeting today. So we've got a couple of opportunities coming up in the next few months that we definitely want everyone to get involved in. All right, so before we start though, I'd like to share this video, and I'll just make a quick note on this video. So this is going to talk about rainwater in the city. There is a part in the video where it says in some cities, and it'll start talking about how in some cities, when rainwater drains into pipes underground, it's also connected to pipes that carry sewage from homes or inside buildings, like from the toilet or washing machine, right? That those systems are combined and it can cause problems. I can't get it out of the video, but I just want to let you know, we luckily do not have that problem in Shoreline. We have the other problems they talk about in this video, but not the combined sewer and rainwater.
When it rains, water from the sky lands on the ground. This is called stormwater. When it lands on pervious surfaces like forests, soils, and wetlands, it filters slowly down and eventually becomes part of our groundwater, streams, and rivers, bringing water to plants and animals like us. Plants take up the water through their roots and release it into the air. But when water hits urban or impervious surfaces like concrete, roofs, driveways, and roads, that water can't soak into the ground. It flows across the land, picking up pollutants along the way, like dog poop, garbage, and oil from cars. This is called polluted stormwater runoff. And sometimes, during big rainstorms, it floods streets, parks, and our rivers and streams, causing soil erosion and damaging property. In cities and towns, stormwater runs into gutters and drains, which lead down into pipes. In most cities, the stormwater goes directly to streams and lakes without being cleaned. While in some cities, the stormwater runoff is combined with water people have used.
This is the
in
problem we
industrial
don't
treatment
have.
plants to be cleaned. When we have a lot of rain, this combined dirty water overflows directly into the water we play in. This stormwater runoff is a big problem. We all need clean water for drinking, eating, and playing. Engineers like me all over Puget Sound are working with nature towards solutions to help solve our stormwater problems. Oh, hello there. There are lots of ways to help reduce the amount of stormwater runoff and pollution, from changing personal habits and planting trees, to capturing rainwater and installing natural solutions. Anything we can do to reduce pollution and slow water down will help. Visit Puget Sound Starts Here to learn more about what you can do to protect our streams.
So since that video was done by PugetSound.org, then I must presume that we do have communities in the area that combine sewer and storm runoff,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
it's like really in 2023, we're still doing that.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and I'll answer this question. And I should have noted it earlier, but we'll have some other opportunities to ask questions too, just to keep moving through the presentation. But yeah, so in Seattle, they have areas with combined sewer overflows. And as we'll talk about, I think more in this presentation too, part of this issue is this is old infrastructure, right? And so some of these problems have become worse and worse over time as we have more hard surfaces. This is actually a really great transitional question, Patty, so thank you. But these problems, as we have more hard surfaces throughout the cities and more people in the cities as well. So really working with some old infrastructure and looking for ways to retrofit or to have new infrastructure that makes it. But yes, there are some communities here in Puget Sound that still have those systems. Luckily, not our problem here in Shoreline. All right, can everybody hear me? I feel like I'm really leaning toward this mic. Good volume. Thank you for the feedback. All right, so some really key pieces from this presentation. So when rainwater falls on softer surfaces, so forest and garden, that rainwater is going to soak into the ground. It's going to travel down to groundwater, and it's going to slowly and gently make its way back to streams, lakes, and Puget Sound. This really protects streams, lakes, and Puget Sound, and it's a really great natural process that we are looking in our work now moving forward to recreate whenever we can. Another really amazing thing happens when rainwater goes through soil. If there's pollution in that water, the soil pulls out much of that pollution. So when that water is reaching groundwater and going back to streams, lakes, and Puget Sound, it's also a lot cleaner. So this is a really powerful natural process, and I'll be talking about it more as we get into later slides as well. But when that water is falling on hard surfaces, which is much of the areas of shoreline, there's two problems that come up, right? We've got more flooding. Flooding is more likely, at least. There's fewer areas for that water to soak in. And also that rainwater is going to pick up whatever it touches. And so it becomes polluted, dirty water. And then that water flows down through these drains. Do I have a laser on here? Oh, no, laserless. Oh, what? Aha. All right, so here it's going to flow down through drains in the city, right? Drains or ditches, and then it's going to go down into the underground pipes here that are carrying that rainwater going straight into these natural bodies of water, right? So streams, lakes, and Puget Sound, and that's how they can become dirty. And so you might be asking, why is it that we have systems like this? Very similar to Patty's question from earlier. This is old infrastructure. This is really was put in place initially to deal with the issue of flooding, making sure that when we added these hard spaces that we could move that water away from our communities so people did not experience flooding. So there are most of the storm drains and the ditches throughout Shoreline still move water this way into streams, lakes, and Puget Sound, but we do have some new projects as well, which I'll talk about in a bit. But important to know this does happen. All right, so again, this is not a problem that we have where it combines with the sewer from indoors. I just want to make sure that's very clear, but I think I've done it at this point. Everyone nodding? Yeah. Okay, great. All right. So here's the other side of rainwater that's coming off of our city, going through storm drains and ditches into those underground pipes. You can see here this really dirty water that's pouring into the creek. This blue heron here who's looking pretty not pleased with the situation. So a question for those both online and in the room, but here in Shoreline, what type of pollution do you think is being picked up by rainwater and taken into our streams? Everything. That's a good start. Oil, fertilizer. Yeah. Herbicides. Mm-hmm.
From the track.
Okay.
And pointing out dog feces.
Yep. All right. You guys are nailing it. Right. So leaks from cars and vehicles, oil, gas, fuel, garden chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, weed and feed, even fertilizers. I've got this picture of a tire right here. Tire's been around for a long time. Tire wear particles, we found out in the past few years just how toxic, how bad of a pollutant these are. Could probably do a whole presentation just on this. However, just something to flag, you'll hear more and more about it and the work that's being done to help reduce this source of pollution, but this is a big one. So dog poop, we talked about that, bacteria and dog waste, right? When it gets into streams, it makes it unsafe for people to go swimming in, fishing in. It's unsafe for wildlife. We've got car wash soap. This includes, there we go. This includes biodegradable car wash soap too. In order for biodegradable car wash soap to be safe, it needs to actually go through soil to biodegrade. And so if it's just washing off into the road and going straight into streams, it can be just as harmful as regular soap as well. And then just really to hit this point home, right? Everything, nearly anything can be a pollutant. We say only rain down the drain. Even natural things like leaves, grass clippings, compost, mulch, all of these can be sources of pollution as well. If you think about our cities, it really comes down to just the amount of material that our storm drains and our ditches can carry to our natural waterways. It's far more than what would occur in a natural environment, in a stream, in a forested area. So all of this material can really cause the water chemistry to change, which is harmful to the wildlife there. It can smother fish eggs and it can smother water bugs in there as well. And then it can lead to other issues outside of pollution, like just clogging the drains and the ditches and the storm drains, which causes flooding throughout the city. And this last photo here, I've got this nice muddy water, what appears to be muddy water. So again, it seems like it's something that's natural, but this is construction runoff. It can cause a lot of problems. So we ask that if you see this type of pollution going into a storm drain, you call the city right away. You can just call City Hall, the City Hall number. If you Google it, you can call us anytime, any day, and we have staff available to respond. So if you see anything like this, please let us know. All right. And why? Because when this water pollutes these streams, lakes, and Puget Sound, it's harming wildlife. So I'm pretty sure here that most people know about what our orcas have been going through here in Puget Sound. They're having a hard time. Their populations are dying out. A lot of their babies that have been born dead or die within hours after birth. A big portion of this is because they've been in Puget Sound, which is highly polluted water, and their bodies have a lot of that pollution, those toxins in it. Another big problem that they're facing is that the Chinook salmon, which they rely on, it's this picture over here. Whoops. Oh no, close your eyes. No, so Chinook salmon in the top right, they rely on Chinook salmon, and they are also having a problem holding their populations, right? Their populations are also dying out. And this has to do with pollution in streams, and Puget Sound as well is one of the major reasons why those populations are dying. These are two really well-known species throughout Puget Sound that we've heard have lots of problems, but it's really important to remember that we have a lot of really incredible wildlife here in Shoreline as well. These are two of my favorite animals and two of the crowd pleasers, I will say, from our summer outreach events. But here's the painted turtle in the top right or the top left, and right below it, we have some river otters. You can find these at Ronald Bog, Twin Ponds, and Echo Lake, along with many other animals that we have throughout the city. So we still have lots of great wildlife, and we want to make sure that we're protecting those as well. And of course, when wildlife is harmed, our community is harmed as well. So it's important to protect wildlife, I would argue, just for the value of wildlife. But a lot of people here in the Northwest are in the Northwest because of the opportunities to connect with nature. So we have people who are here who really enjoy fishing or going and collecting shellfish. They enjoy swimming and just being out in nature. All of these things are put at risk when we have pollution in our waters. We have beach closures for shellfish, so you can't go and harvest shellfish if there's too much pollution. Fisheries, when we have populations of fish that are going down, then there's closures on those fisheries, so you can't go out and fish those. And we have beach closures as well when those beaches become unsafe to swim in. And of course, there are people here who don't just do these things for fun, right? They rely on them to put food on the table, or they're also relying on them because it's their job. That's how they bring money home. And so when wildlife is harmed because of this pollution, it's also harming our community as well. All right. So I really covered, I think, that our team is working on reducing that flooding and that pooling water in the roadways, and also working to reduce pollution in that can enter stream, lakes, and Puget Sound through rainwater. So now I'm just going to walk through a number of our programs that we have that are supporting this work, how we're trying to achieve this work, and I'll also talk about the projects that we have to manage rainwater and reduce flooding and reduce pollution as well. All right, first one up, not the most exciting program, but a very important one, maintaining the drainage system that we have. So these are the really basic elements of our system. We've got storm drains, ditches that are collecting that rainwater, and then that pipe that's underground that's carrying it to streams, lakes, and Puget Sound. So you can see we've got about 8,000 storm drains, 28 miles or 45 kilometers of ditches, 136 miles or 219 kilometers of pipe. So maintaining our drainage system includes inspecting that system to make sure everything's okay and to identify problems that might be there. Problems could mean that we need to do cleaning. It could mean that we need to fix something, or it could mean that we need to replace a portion of the system as well. So every year we inspect 50% of the storm drains on public property throughout the city. We also inspect 7 to 8 miles or 11.5 kilometers of pipe. We have a camera, a telescoping camera that goes and does those inspections. And then a third of our ditches are also inspected every single year. So again, if we find issues through those inspections, then we're going ahead and making those corrections, fixing it, cleaning it, whatever it needs. And this is a really important piece of making sure that we're reducing flooding, that this infrastructure is going to be working and we're not going to have issues cropping up throughout the year. Another big piece of what we do is we clean up pollution. So I showed you that picture earlier of the muddy water from construction runoff. So we clean up spills and respond to spills or dumping that's happening. So here's an example right here. These 4 pictures on the left. The first one shows a large spill of hydraulic fuel. This happened from a truck. And then the second picture shows staff that are laying down this natural absorbent to soak up that hydraulic fuel. In this third picture, we've got our street sweeper who's coming through and cleaning all of that up, picking all up the absorbent and the fuel. And in the fourth picture, we have a nice clean street again. So we ask If you see dumping or if you see spills, and this can be spills in the road, it could be in a storm drain, a ditch, or even in a stream like Puget Sound. If you see any of that, to call us any time of day. We have staff available all day, every day, even on holidays, to respond to this. So please let us know right away. This is really key in order to keep pollution out of our waterways. And then I had to include a picture of our street sweeper. A lot of people see the street sweeper and they think the purpose is for picking up leaves and trash. It does that, and we really appreciate that. It also picks up a lot of dirt from the road, dirt that has some really bad pollutants in it. So I had talked earlier about the tire wear particles. So this is helping to pick that up and keep it out of our waterways. It also picks up heavy metals from things like dust from copper brake pads, and then also dirt that has soaked up fluids from vehicle spills and equipment spills. So this is a really important tool that we have in our toolkit to keep pollution out of our waterways. We also work with the community to reduce those sources of pollution. Here in these photos, I've got two of our volunteer programs. So we have these two really awesome volunteers from the Richmond Beach neighborhood. You can see there's this medallion, this marker that says no dumping drains to sound. They're putting those markers on storm drains throughout Richmond Beach, letting people know that those drains go directly into Puget Sound. They've marked over 100 drains in their neighborhood. If you have drains in your neighborhood that you want to mark, come talk to me. If you want to be a rock star volunteer as well. We have this program throughout the whole city. We also have our Adopt a Drain program where people will adopt the drains near their home and they remove the leaves, the natural debris and trash off of those. And this is helping to reduce flooding in their neighborhood by making sure water can enter those storm drains and making sure that material doesn't go and clog those pipes. And it also keeps all of that out of our natural waterways. So it's reducing pollution as well. And then this photo over here on the right, we also work with businesses that are working with materials that can become pollution if they spill into the road or spill into into storm drains. And so we work with them to put practices into place to reduce the likelihood that that spill would happen. And if a spill does, then they have the tools that they need to clean it up and take care of it. All right, so that is our programs at a glance. I will say we do some other work as well, but those are some of the big ones that we're doing to reduce flooding and to reduce pollution in our waterways. And so now I want to talk about our projects. But before I jump into our projects, I just want to reference back to this slide right here and to our stormwater engineer, Betsy, from the video earlier, who said we can work with nature to solve issues related to flooding and related to pollution. And so I talked about how we have this older system that was really designed just to carry water out of neighborhoods. Now I'm going to talk about newer systems and tools that we have that we use in many of our projects to work with nature and treat stormwater, treat that runoff to make sure that it's clean when it re-enters natural waterways. All right, so really going back to that idea of we're going to let rainwater soak into the ground. That soil is going to help filter out pollution, and then it's going to return to groundwater where it can then move gently and slowly back to streams, lakes, and Puget Sound. And again, using this as a tool to help reduce flooding and pooling water, and also to protect our waterways from pollution and erosion. And I know I haven't talked about erosion yet, but erosion happens when we have really large storms. And if you remember that blue heron with the pipe, if you can imagine water just coming out of that full blast, it's been described by some as a fire hose. It tears up the sides of streams and lakes and it ruins the habitat there. So erosion is another piece that we really work on, slowing water down whenever we can. So in some areas of the cities, unfortunately, we cannot create spaces that soak in the rainwater. It doesn't work for a couple of different reasons. And we don't ignore those portions of the city. So we work there too to make sure that we can move rainwater out of those areas so it's not flooding those. But wherever we can, we're working to create these spaces that soak in rainwater. And when we do these projects, this is really where we can offer a lot of different benefits to the city. Benefits that include things like restoring habitat, bringing animals back to shoreline, making our city greener by planting those trees and those gardens that soak up rainwater. Again, preparing for climate change, fighting climate change, so getting ready for more intense storms, and also planting those trees and those gardens that are soaking up carbon dioxide. We have projects that we call depave projects. And these are projects where we're removing pavement that's either too much pavement that's not being used, or it's pavement that's causing problems. And we put something that is more functional there, or something that's going to add community benefit in those spaces. And then also our work, we plant a lot of native plants, and that's really important for supporting our pollinators and native songbirds throughout the city, which I know a lot of people in their own time do a lot of work within their own gardens to support these animals as well. And so I'm going to walk through 5 projects that we have throughout the city that demonstrate how we do this work and how we have these benefits coming from it. And with each of these projects, there's also some added benefits. So something that's special and unique to each of these projects. And hopefully you've seen some of these. So first up, Cromwell Park. Can I see show of hands? Who's been to Cromwell Park? Yeah, okay. All right. Yes, most people in the room. I'm not sure if folks are raising their hand on the chat, but hopefully most of you as well. This is a park in the Meridian Park neighborhood. And here in this park, we created a wetland. So this is not a natural wetland. This is a man-made or created wetland. You can see it here in this photo. And so water from the surrounding neighborhood flows into storm drains and ditches, and then flows into this wetland here. And so the wetland allows that water to collect in a safe place, prevent flooding in those neighborhoods, and then it soaks into the ground, the soil, and the plants are filtering out pollution, and it's returning to groundwater and protecting the downstream waters as well. This park also, along with reducing flooding and pooling water and protecting our waterways from pollution or erosion, help to restore habitat and supports pollinators and native songbirds. So lots of plants put here in this wetland. If you've been there, maybe you've seen the red-winged blackbirds or you've heard the frogs there. So doing good work in that regard. It also helps to make our city greener. So this is a photo from when the park first opened. So you can see very little tree, the trees are small here and the plants are small. It's certainly filled in quite a bit. And also these trees and these plants are helping to prepare and fight for climate change. And of course, this project created a great community park. This is a photo from this past summer with Swing and Summer Eve, all these folks that are gathered here to listen to live music. All right, our next project, trying to find the magic spot for my clicker, if the slide will go. So this is Green Street. This is one of my favorite projects because it shows how we can incorporate these ideas and these designs into neighborhoods. And so this is in the Briarcrest neighborhood, 148th and 17th, just a couple blocks up from the Goodwill. And in this project, has anybody seen this project? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Try to drive it. Well, it makes you slow down, which some would say is a benefit. So yes, so in this neighborhood, lots of roundabout and curving streets. So what was happening here is that in this neighborhood, there was no drainage. So no storm drains, no ditches, and they had issues with flooding and pooling water. So lots of excess pavement that wasn't doing them any good. So this is an example of one of our depave projects. So we took out the extra pavement and instead, in place of it, there are gardens that soak up rainwater from the road. And then also these sidewalks are made of permeable pavement. Has anybody heard of permeable pavement here? Got some experts in the room. But yeah, permeable pavement, we also call thirsty pavement. It soaks up rainwater or any water that's on it. And so it's functioning similar to the garden right next to it. It's going to soak up that water, allow it to soak into the soil and be cleaned, and then slowly return back to streams, lakes, and Puget Sound. So this project is reducing the flooding and pooling and protecting our waterways. It's an example of a depave project, as I mentioned. Lots of native plants and trees were planted as part of this. So again, we're making our city greener. We're helping to prepare and fight climate change. And we're also supporting pollinators and native songbirds. And in this area, there were new sidewalks that were added. So there weren't sidewalks in this area before. So it makes it more walkable for the folks that live here or move through here. Here's an example of a pump station that we have. So throughout the city, has anybody been to Pump Station 26? Okay. Yeah, so throughout the city, we have these really low areas where water collects. And in some of these, we have pump stations. And so the purpose of the pump station is just to pump that water uphill to keep the area from flooding. And so this one is in the North City neighborhood. We had an old pump station there that just needed to be replaced. It was too old. And so we redesigned the site. We moved that pump station underground. And next to it, we put these really large tanks underground. And so when it rains in that neighborhood, all of the water from the neighborhood goes into storm drains and ditches. and it goes down into those big tanks. And at the bottom of those tanks, there's holes in those tanks. And so again, that water is allowed to soak into the ground, get filtered out by the soil, and it's protecting Maclear Creek, which is in this area. So allowing water to slowly make its way back through groundwater to Maclear Creek. In the event that there's a lot of rain and it's too much for the area to soak in, we still have that pump there, so it's preventing flooding in that space. So this pump station offered a lot. This is starting to turn into, hopefully you all know, like, we'll have like a jingle by the end. But we're reducing flooding and pollution. We're protecting waterways. When we make our city greener, we're also preparing for and fighting climate change and adding all of those native plants and the trees throughout the area, also supporting pollinators and native songbirds. And by moving this pump station underground, we created a new community space, one that we'll be installing art in the coming future as well. So forgive this photo. It's still a pretty new project, so there's temporary fencing up, but if you're in this area, 185th and 10th, please go take a look around. The walkway around here is made of permeable pavement as well, so if that's new to you, you can go check it out, and we have a demonstration rain garden here too. All right, so this project, the Aurora Corridor project, who was around Shoreline when this was taking place? Yeah, so this, I will not say, it was not a surface water project. This was a transportation project, but a lot of pollution comes off of roadways. So when we have these transportation projects, we're looking for opportunities to put surface water tools in here. So really trying to collect the water that's coming off the road, slow it down, and then make sure that it gets cleaned through these natural systems before it goes back into waterways. So these photos right here, North 192nd, the water here goes to Echo Lake. And here you can see in this bottom photo, we've got the medians with the trees and the plantings, and then also on the sidewalks. So all beneath the ground here are all sorts of different tools that are being used to capture that water, slow it down, and then clean it before it goes to Echo Lake. And so again, we're reducing flooding and runoff that comes off of Aurora, and we're protecting Echo Lake with this project specifically. Again, making our city greener, preparing for and fighting climate change, and supporting pollinators with and native songbirds with the plantings here. And this is just a shout out to the medians here. They're doing double duty, right? So they're improving safety, and they're also filtering that polluted water. And the last project I'll share is also a favorite. This is the Hidden Lake Dam removal. Who went to Hidden Lake when it was Hidden Lake? Yeah, in Shoreview Park. And who's been there since the stream has been restored? All right. Well, you should go check it out because things sure have changed. So Hidden Lake was a man-made lake. Members of the Boeing family dammed up Boeing Creek to create their personal fishing lake. And unfortunately, what happened is the water that feeds, the stream that feeds Hidden Lake was also bringing with it a lot of sand. And so in order to keep it as a lake, it required regular removal of that sand, which was really expensive to do. And it also did not offer a lot of great environmental benefit. So the city made the choice to go ahead and restore it back as a stream. So this is an example of a restoration project, which is also some of the work that we do throughout the city is restoring the natural environment and natural spaces. So in this top right corner of the picture, you can see this little wooden boardwalk. You can walk that boardwalk to see the restored stream. It also has a really great sign that talks about all of the animals that we hope will come back to this habitat now that it's been restored. Lots of trees were planted in this. I think it was like 1,000 willow stakes were put in, along many other trees as well. And also lots of native plants. So certainly making our city greener and working on climate change as well, and supporting pollinators and native songbirds. There's a second phase to this project. So where the stream runs under the road, there's a pipe right now, a culvert, and it's being replaced with a larger one. And that's going to help prevent flooding in that area and downstream. And also it's going to be large enough for fish to be able to move through. And so it's helping to the environment, it's helping fish that way too. And one really great aspect about this project is it's obviously restoring the environment in this space right here, but all that sand that was filling up in Hidden Lake is now moving down Boeing Creek and moving into Puget Sound, where it's restoring deltas, these sandy areas that are really important for salmon. When they first come out of streams, they hang out in these deltas before they go out into the ocean for a while. And it's a really important place for them to grow before they're large enough to move out there. So downstream environmental benefits as well. All right, so I have been talking at you for a while. It's a very patient group. So I want to take a break, maybe 3 minutes or so, to let John do some talking, answer some of your hot questions. So please, if you have, I'm sure maybe some things have come through on the chat. I see a couple of, at least a little icon, but if there's anyone in the room too that has questions, we'd love to take a few questions before we move on to talking about this planning process.
It would seem that a ditch is less beneficial than a pipe. We have lots of ditches. Is there a plan to convert ditches to pipes?
I'll take that one.
Yeah.
So ditches are less than ideal in places where let's say you need a sidewalk or something like that. But ditches do provide a number of benefits for stormwater management. They tend to have more capacity than a pipe of a similar size and depth. They tend to be vegetated, not always. You'll see ditches sometimes lined with asphalt or half pipes and things like that around the city, but most of the ditches you'll find in the city have a grass lining or some other similar vegetation. And that vegetation also helps to slow down and treat the water. And the sort of final benefit that ditches can provide is allowing the water to slow down, infiltrate. Obviously you don't want the ditches to fill up and overtop. That's bad. But a lot of ditches, when they're functioning completely normally, you'll see water that's ponding up, moving slowly. And sometimes it's even soaking into the ground before it goes down into creeks. So we tend to like ditches, but we also, from a utility management perspective, understanding these benefits they provide, but we also understand that there could be conflict sometimes between, let's say if there's a sidewalk, the ditch goes away, right? You got to put it in a pipe. Oftentimes that happens around developments. Sometimes if there are someone who, let's say, wants to expand a driveway or whatever, and that ditch needs to get shortened, that's okay as well. So we sort of conditionally allow the ditches to go away, but we prefer keeping them if we can. Okay. We also have a question in the chat. So maybe I'll take that one, if that's all right. This is from Anne, I think. And Anne wants to know, how often does the street sweeper get to Aurora? I believe, I feel like this is like a pop quiz. I believe I should know this. I think it's monthly. Aurora gets the most frequent sweeping of all of our streets in Shoreline, in recognition of the higher loading and the higher pollution potential. I don't recall if the frequency is monthly or slightly more frequent than that. But we do tend to sweep our busiest roads most frequently, and Aurora is the busiest of them all, so it gets the most sweeping. And then our local streets, the sort of neighborhood secondary streets, those get swept maybe less frequently, but we do tend to run the sweeper a lot this time of year because of all the leaf fall. So if you're going to see the sweeper, it's probably going to be right around this time of year. So Anne, hopefully I answered that question. I think it's monthly, but I might have to come back on that one. Yep. Okay. I think that she had kind of a two-parter about does it clean it every year or more often. So I think I got to that one. Thank you, Anne.
As far as the impervious space and that sort of thing, is planning and billing and permitting part of this process, and planning for rooftop gardens and some sort of exterior green space? I heard 10 to 13,000 people, and we were talking before that it could be, for our plan, we could end up with 30,000 by 2035. To do that, obviously we're going out of the ground and doing some of those kinds of things, but are there some other kinds of garden type things that people don't think of as a natural garden, like a rooftop or some of those kinds of things in the planning phase?
I'll take that one. So this is something, a topic we could talk about for a very long time. I don't have some of the firsthand knowledge of all the interactions between redevelopment and stormwater, but there are very stringent codes in place and requirements for most redevelopments. So not necessarily see this in action unless you're really watching the construction closely, but most construction of a certain size. So this is generally like above a sort of single parcel size. So a lot of these larger developments that are going in right now have to manage all the water leaving their site, regardless of how much impervious surface. And most of the sites are mostly, rooftops and pavement by the time they're done developing. But the stormwater impacts from these projects are mitigated to the point of where they function hydrologically as if they were forested condition. So you'll see very little water leaving these sites. And this is typically because they'll use massive vaults for storage. If they're fortunate enough to have good infiltrating soils, they'll maximize those soils. So that's most of the stormwater management features you're going to see triggered by development are these sort of larger vaults to slow down those flows and soak them into the ground. You'll also see a lot of impervious pavement as well. And this is sort of a benefit, I guess an incentive for developers to use impervious pavements because it doesn't count towards their need to do those large vaults, so they can make smaller vaults the more impervious pavement that they install. So if you walk around a lot of the newer developments, you'll see a lot of impervious pavements. Green roofs are fantastic. We have one right above us in the council chambers. If you've never had a chance to see it, it's pretty neat. They don't pencil out, I believe. I mean, I'm not a developer, but we have supportive code for doing green roofs, but my understanding is they're not cost effective enough for most developers to use on a widespread level. So we don't see them used as a stormwater management facility in very wide use in our city, except for some demonstration places like on above our heads right now. So did that answer your question? Any other? But development is generally, from a stormwater perspective, most projects of a certain size are actually beneficial to our streams and our stormwater systems.
Okay, I did the math.
Okay.
So you said, Christy said, we'll blame it on her, that there are about 136 miles of pipe. And on the rotation of how often they're inspected, it would take 17 years to inspect all the pipes to make sure nothing's leaking and that they're functioning as they should. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But my question is, crumb rubber. Do we still have crumb rubber sports fields? I know what the effect is on the environment of those, but I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that and considerations for the city to ban the use of that material and to go with other alternatives for sports fields.
Yeah, I would, I can't speak to the idea of banning crumb rubber as a material. I don't know where the city would have that authority, and it certainly wouldn't likely come from a stormwater perspective. I think a lot of my understanding is a fair number of the fields that are in the city are owned either by parks or by the school district. And I believe the city has moved away from crumb rubber. I'm not 100% sure about the school district, but I have a sense they may be. So I think I could say I'm not a fan of crumb rubber. And that's something I think when we get more regulation on the chemical that comes from tire particles, we may have a potential authority on crumb rubber. But for one, I don't believe we've seen studies specifically about crumb rubber if they have the same impacts as the tire wear particles on roadways. And again, this, Christy said, the studies for all this are very, very cutting edge and very new, and they're all being done in this area, which is very cool because this is a global issue. But there are I would say that's very much an emerging topic. And how it would extend into potential regulatory impacts on crumb rubber fields is not in our current stormwater regulation permit or in the next one, but it could be something that comes up in the future. I think in the meantime, working with the owners of those fields to, share what your thought on the dangers of them would be a good way to go about that. And again, I don't believe the city is currently using crumb rubber.
feels they have not been done all.
Right.
I'm
Mhm.
And about the stormwater pipes, you're absolutely correct. It's a long inspection cycle, but we had started in 2012, and I think we're getting pretty close to being done with our first cycle. So that's right about where we're at. And, you know, it takes a long time, but there was a lot of pipes and we have to manage our resources. And we had never inspected them, any of them really previously to that. And a lot of them have been in the ground for 50, 60 years. So it's
Yeah, and we do have, now that we've done that initial inspection, we know a lot more about where some problems are, right? So we have a way to prioritize those moving forward as well.
Yeah, a lot of those pipes that are in the ground for 60 years are holding up very well also. So it's not like we want to just tear them all out and put them back in for no reason. So we're finding all the flaws and fixing them as prioritized. And there's another question in the chat. It's Annette was asking for us to expand on the importance of rainwater going in to replenish our groundwater. Pipes to the sound depletes our aquifer over time. And I would say very much that's in the ethos of wanting the water to soak up where it falls. And that's what, you haven't done the sponge slide yet?
I don't have the sponge
Oh, the sponge
anymore.
slide is gone.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but the idea of using infiltration as a stormwater tool, and there's a bunch of ways to do that. The permeable pavement does it, rain gardens and bioretention does it. We have even more simple features that are literally pipes with holes in them in the ground with gravel, and the water just soaks into the ground. And if you have the right types of soils, this can be very effective. Some soils are the glacial till, which is over compacted by, 3,000 feet, or I forget how tall the glaciers were. Maybe they were like several thousand feet of ice. So some of the soils aren't as receptive to infiltration, and we're more limited in our ability to infiltrate. But that's absolutely right that we want the water to soak in as much as possible where it can, because instead of all that water rushing into the stream and blowing it out during the wet season, which is a major habitat impact to all of our urbanized streams, is that those high peak flows that scour out all of the materials that should be there and dig the creek into a sort of a narrower channel. Instead, if you allow that water to soak in, it migrates underground over time. And I think you said this, and it seeps out as groundwater seeps throughout the year, and it keeps the creek flowing during the summer conditions. And we have those long summers that are dry. So that's why we're all about soaking the water into the ground wherever we can, and continuing to slowly kind of redo our stormwater systems in the city to do more and more of this kind of infiltration and soaking the water in.
Awesome. Thank you. I think if we can move on, we'll save some time at the end. So I want to make sure we have time for questions about the planning process as well. All right. So surface water master plan. This is a planning process that we go through every 6 years. And the purpose of this process is to identify our priority projects and programs for those next 6 years. So we will complete this process in 2024 and we'll get to work right away. So 2024 to 2030 is when this plan will be implemented. When we're creating a plan, we first need to make sure that, the plan has to include whatever we need to do to make sure we're meeting state and federal laws. There are state and federal laws that guide us and tell us what we need to do, actions that we need to take to reduce the amount of pollution going into our waterways. So a baseline plan is going to be meeting those. That's our bare minimum. Above and beyond that, anything that we have in our plan, we want that to reflect community priorities. So talking about all the benefits on these past few slides, we really want to work with community, and we're having conversations with community members to really understand what is it that you want to see in Shoreline over these next 6 years during this planning period. What should we be prioritizing in our work? And when we do this planning process as well, it's also a time where we evaluate what the resources required to implement this plan is. So will they be changing to staffing resources, and also thinking about our funding. So we are primarily funded through surface water management fees. These are collected at the same time as property taxes. For single family, and all properties pay these. For single family properties, it was about $27 a month in 2023. For other types of properties, the fees were different and more generally. not generally, pretty much always. But I'll talk about that a little bit more in some coming slides. And so, like I said, we're having conversations with community members, and for a few different reasons. First off, you are our customer, right? You're paying these fees. So you're either paying them directly as a property owner, or if you're a renter, the amount of rent that you pay is going to increase if fees increase or property taxes and fees so increase. So indirectly, you're paying for these services as well. So it's really important for you to provide your input on these services. I talked about that bare minimum. So again, we have our bare minimum of having to make sure that our plan is going to meet what's required by state and federal law, but anything above and beyond that, it should reflect community priorities. And so we need your input to be able to do that. And then finally, we want to make sure that everyone benefits from our services. When we look at city planning processes, we know that there are a lot of communities that are historically underrepresented in these processes. So this is particularly people of color, people with low or no income, and also people who do not speak English or still learning English. And we also know that when we talk about these rainwater problems, oftentimes it's these communities that are facing the harshest impacts from these, right? So if you don't have a lot of money and you get hit with flooding waters from the road, drainage issues, those are going to be harder to recover from. If you don't speak English or you're still learning English, it's going to be harder for you to access programs and services that we provide. And we also know that when we take a look at the city, the areas where we have the most hard surfaces and the fewest amounts of trees or gardens are also areas where we have the highest populations of people of color living. So it's really important as we go through this process, we are working with these different community members and really getting them involved and making sure that our plan reflects their needs and their priorities too. All right, so talking about the conversations we're having, there's a few different main areas, main conversations we're having. So first up, I want you to imagine that Shoreline is your house. So you have a budget, you have a certain amount of money, and you want to increase the value of your house, right? So what projects would you take on to increase the value of your house? What projects might you wait on? And this is essentially what we're asking you when we're asking you about these priorities. So from those slides earlier where I talked about these different benefits that the community can get from these projects, what is it that's most important to you? What do you think will increase the value of Shoreline and is worth paying for through surface water management fees? We're going to collect this information from people, and we're having these conversations. We've been having these conversations all summer, actually, but we're going to continue to do this, and I'll talk about more opportunities to provide your feedback here soon. But when we get this information, this will be really key into developing our plans. And so we'll be talking with community members about what these plans. So this is a very hypothetical example of these plans. But number one, so we'll be looking at plan one, that's the bare minimum, right? So meeting those state and federal laws. And you see this dollar sign over to the right. So that would be the minimum of a surface water management fee. What does it cost in order just to implement the bare minimum? And then we'll propose several other plans as well. And as you can see, the services with each type of plan, we're moving upwards from plan 2 to plan 3, plan 4 being the most ambitious with the most services and outcomes that you would see in the community. But also we see also the costs will increase with that as well. And so when we propose this plan, we'll have more numbers for you. We'll have harder numbers and also harder services. So this is really just a hypothetical slide to explain what this process will look like. All right, so we talked about how those folks that are underrepresented, right, are often the folks that are also having the worst impacts from these rainwater problems. And so as we work with community members, really reflecting and looking at the programs that we have and whether there's barriers to accessing these services and participating in these programs, looking at different needs that aren't being met that might be unique to these communities, and really taking the time to think about how through this process we can expand and change our programs and our services so that everybody is receiving these. So increasing equity through our services and our programs is going to be a big piece of the conversations we're having with community members. And then finally, there's going to be a number of different policy questions that we ask. I'm going to highlight one here tonight, but just know that there'll be others coming your way as well. But this is a big one. This is feedback on our rate structure. So thinking about our surface water management fees and the rates that people pay. So currently, Oh. All right, so currently, so here's an example of two homes. So this one on the left is a more standard home here in Shoreline. You probably have a lot of like these in your neighborhood. Maybe you have a home like this in your neighborhood on the right, but we can tell one of the big differences, at least from a surface water perspective, is that one of them has a lot more hard surface. But currently, right now, both of these homes pay the same rate, which is $27 a month. At least that's what it was in 2023. Thinking about other properties, that rate is based on the percentage of the hard surface on the property, and it's charged per acre. So I've got this example down here. You can see these properties are really similar because I've copied and pasted them. The only difference in this bottom right corner is I've added a little more green space to the one on the left. And so if we look at the percentage of hard surface, as this example, we've got 44% on the left-hand side, and we've got 46% on the right-hand side. So these are really similar properties, right? Just a little bit more hard surface on the one on the right. But the fees they pay are really different. So the one that's at 44% is put in this bracket where it's paying $132 a month per acre. The one on the right falls into a bracket where it's paying nearly twice as much, $255 per month per acre. So even though they have close to the same amount of hard surfaces, they're paying pretty different rate based on this rate structure. And so our question is, should we change this rate structure? A lot of cities use this rate structure right now, but there's also a number of cities throughout this area that are changing the way that they charge for these fees. And they're specifically switching to a fee that's based on the actual amount of hard surface on a property, whether it's a single family property or it's a different type of property. And so the question is, should we change? Should we stay the same? If we change, it will cost staff time and it will cost money to do this. And so the question is really, is this a priority for our community right now? And what do people want to see us make this change? So just some hypothetical examples. So underline hypothetical, this is not what the fees would look like per se, but right now we have these two homes. So right now, this sort of before the current status is they're paying $27 a month. But this would look like potentially this single family home on the right paying $27 a month and this one on the left, paying an increased rate because it has more hard surface. So something more like $50 a month. And then here, this example of the two properties that are really similar. So 44% and 46%, right? So we're going to do away with those percentages and we're going to look at the actual amount of hard surface. So before, this one on the left was paying $132 a month per acre. The one on the right, $255. So nearly twice as much per acre per month. And so that would switch to $200 a month. And then $210 a month is this hypothetical example, right? So based on the proportion of that hard surface area, they would have much more similar fees that they would be paying. All right, so those are some of the big topics that we'll be talking about through this. And so now I just want to go over, aside from tonight, some other opportunities to provide feedback on this and get involved with the planning process. So first off, if you have a community event that could look like a book club, a church meeting, a parent group, really whatever you're doing, right? And you know that people want to talk about this, then please reach out to me because I would love to come and talk with you. And really, if you're working with folks that are part of those underrepresented communities that we talked about, so people of color, people who don't know English or still learning English, and people with low or no income, if you're working with them and you want to get them involved, we would love to connect with you. And just know that we have interpretation services available for this as well. If you can't get enough of this tonight, you can come visit us tomorrow at the Dia de los Muertos celebration. So we'll be over at Spartan Recreation and we'll have a table there and be talking to folks about these priorities and the work that we can do in the community. And then in 2 weeks, we'll also have a table at the Comprehensive Plan Open House. So it's a good opportunity to come talk to us. Also, the Comprehensive Plan is really looking at policies and work throughout the city at a much higher level. So if you want to provide feedback on other topics, it'll be a good opportunity to come and chat with folks from the city there too. in January of 2024, not too long from now, you will receive a copy of the surface water utility report. All addresses in Shoreline will receive this. This is a copy from last year, so hopefully this looks familiar to you. Maybe you got it. Hopefully you got it. So in this issue that's coming out in 2024, we're going to be talking about these different areas of the plan, so this planning process, areas that we're having conversations with community members about, and providing that context so people can really engage with that. And we'll also have a link to an online survey in there where we'll start gathering some more information on a more widespread basis. And speaking of those surveys, our first survey is going to come out at the same time that that report is released. And so that'll be in January 2024. We're going to be talking about those community priorities. What do you want to see us working on over these next 6 years? We'll be talking about what barriers there are to our services and our programs and looking at ways to increase equity. And also we'll talk about surface management fee rate, that structure, along with some other policy issues as well. And then we'll have a second survey that comes out a few months later in March or April. And really this survey is going to focus primarily on these different proposed plans. So providing you with information on what these different plans could look like, what the costs would be, and gauging what it is that community members think is worth, which one is the preferred plan from the community. All right. So thank you so much for joining us here tonight. Just in case you didn't take all those dates down, then I encourage you to go to this website. If you take one thing down, www.shorelinewa.gov/SWMP. You can put in your email address and we'll send you updates whenever there's an opportunity to participate in this planning process. And if I could ask Kendall, do you mind putting that into the chat for the group? Okay. Well, thank you so much. And now I guess, John, you could probably just stay there if you want, or you could come up to the front. All right, we're going to have John come up to answer all your hard-hitting questions. Thank you, everyone. Okay, perfect. I can also help scan the chat if you'd like.
Okay, I'll go with the couple that are in the chat. First off, again, I'm John Featherstone, Surface Water Utility Manager, and asks about where the pipes of most concern are. I think that's a sort of tag on to the discussion we had during the break. And I would share that the pipes are all over the city, not to alarm anyone, but there's really no sort of concentrated areas of concern. We find we've done our pipe inspections by drainage basin. So we've started with Bowden Creek and Storm Creek and McAleer Lion basins, and we wrapped up with Thornton. So right now we've done sort of the worst of the worst pipe repairs in all those other basins, and we're currently working on a design to do pipe repairs within the Thornton Basin from those most recent inspections. So they're all over, they're under your feet, but there's no cause to be concerned. We're getting a really solid grasp on where the worst of the worst problems are and fixing them as we find them. We've been doing these construction projects since 2014. So we're almost 10 years into these repair program fixes. Annette also asked in the chat, how can natural stormwater management be integrated in more city programs and projects like sidewalks? That is such an excellent question. I would say we're already kind of there. For instance, if you go out to the 20th Ave Northwest sidewalk project, which I believe they're pretty close to being done with. I haven't jogged through there in a while, but that sidewalk is almost all permeable or porous. I think it's actually all porous concrete. I think for maybe curb ramps and things like that, they use more conventional concrete. But they, in addition to using that porous concrete, which soaks into the ground, and those soils in that neighborhood are excellent. They're super sandy. And so that water soaks right in there and pops out further down the bluff next to the railroad tracks and goes into the sound. So it's excellent for infiltration in that area. And we also have 2 large stormwater detention infiltration facilities that we were able to work with that project that were not actually technically required by the sidewalk project to do, but since they were in there doing that work, surface water utility and engineering had a lot of interactions with those sidewalk projects. So we've had similar interactions on other sidewalk projects like the 5th Ave Northeast project north of 175th, the First Ave one that's happening right now, down by Twin Ponds. And so we are continuing to explore ways to make stormwater and surface water system improvements alongside these sidewalk projects. And again, we're not trying to take over the projects. We know the sidewalks have very limited funding, and we are contributing funding from surface water where we go sort of above and beyond what the sidewalks are required to do. Same thing with transportation projects. So you'll see our 145th corridor project that's starting soon. We'll have a lot of stormwater management, kind of similar to the Aurora project that Christy pointed out. So I think as these projects happen, there's some level of stormwater management that needs to happen just due to the regulatory requirements to manage the stormwater, but we're also looking to go above and beyond there as is sort of feasible with our resources. So great question, and we're already working on that and looking for more opportunities, and some of these priorities that Christy has pointed out are places where we could potentially expand those things even further if we have more resources to do that. And there's more questions in the chat. I don't know if I should just keep going through those. I don't want to, chat's taking over. So I think Oliver has a question in the chat about, I'm curious to learn more about stream daylighting projects in Shoreline. What daylighting projects are planned? For instance, Hamlin Creek at Fircrest, Thornton at 148th, and others. How can I learn more? Those are very good questions. Stream daylighting is a great benefit to habitat. And for instance, we have a project that we've been working on for 7 years now up in the Ballinger neighborhood, not far from Burgers Bog Park on 25th Ave Northeast. There's a branch of Lion Creek called Ballinger Creek that goes through Burgers Bog Park and then goes into a series of pipes underneath 25th Avenue before it flows into Lake Forest Park. And that system has long been undersized and flooding. And so we've been working on this project. We have plans for daylighting that stream. And right now we're still looking for funding for the portion of work that's outside of Shoreline within Lake Forest Park. So that's one stream daylighting example in Shoreline. We don't have any others currently in the works. The Hamlin Creek at Fircrest has been, I think that was a recommendation from the Thornton Creek watershed plan. That happened a long time ago, and I think that one is something we might need to take another look at just to see where that lines up on our priorities. And Thornton at 148th, I'm not familiar with that one. I know WashDOT is currently working on putting in a fish passable culvert where Thornton goes underneath I-5, which is amazing because it's been 2,000 feet of not very fish passable pipe. So but we will certainly be looking at more fish-friendly projects. Our salmon safe certification that the city has had since 2019. One of our conditions is to make sure that we're doing more projects that have more salmon habitat incorporated and that we're prioritizing that kind of work. So we will be working on that in the master plan. And that is something, again, that we'll be weighing those kinds of other potential types of work that we can do depending on how many resources we have for them. And let's see. And asks again, how have pipe inspections been done for the Echo Lake watershed? Yes. Yes, we did that as part of the Mackinac Creek basin planning back in probably about 2015. And we have been fixing some pipes in those watersheds for several years now. So that's been done. Did I miss any questions?
No, I think you got them. Any questions from the room? Oh, been so patient. Thank you.
I've got a question and a comment. I suspect most of the pipes are low pressure, like gravity fed. They're not pressured up with pumps rather. There is some pumping, but most of it's gravity. Is that right?
Correct. We have I think we have 7 pump stations. And so we have some stormwater pump stations at different parts of the city. Most of them are kind of in the east side of the city, in the north, around North City actually is where a lot of them are. But correct, we have most of our pipes flow by gravity and open atmosphere. They're not pressurized. They shouldn't be.
Right. And my comment is these two did a table at our Wet and Wild event this last summer that was unbelievable. somehow they managed to attract a bunch of kids to the table. It was very popular. So when they say they'll come and present or do a table or something like that, take it seriously because it's excellent. Thank you too for that.
No,
Thank
thank you.
you.
That was a fun one.
Yeah.
Okay, so question, you talked about surface water property tax and maybe making some adjustments as to how that works. Clarify for me, so we have a lot of new high density buildings either under permit, under construction, or coming soon to the 2 light rail stations. And it's my understanding that for incentive, there has been some tax forgiveness by the city of Shoreline to incentivize developers. Does that also include surface water property tax?
No. And not to get into the legal fine points, but the surface water management fee is called a fee. It's different from a tax. It's assessed in a different sense than a tax is because it's intended to be proportional to the hard surfaces on the property, whereas taxes are usually based on some sort of valuation. So the surface water fee is really, we have some credits. We currently have a credit with the school district for providing education. We have credits for low-income seniors. We have a rainwater harvesting credit, and I think we have a mobile home park kind of credit, which I don't know if we even have any in Shoreline right now, but those are the only credits that we have. And so the developers are not given any kind of breaks for their swim fees.
Good to hear. So then tell us about the new property acquisition on 175th and North City, please.
It's still in progress and it's taken some unexpected turns, but we're still pursuing it. That's probably all I can say, but it's something we very much want to acquire this property. It would be an excellent location for a stormwater facility to help manage the flooding issues that we've long had on 175th. Between 10th Ave and 11th Ave, roughly. There's a low spot there. I think it's the only place in the city where we have a permanent water on the road sign that sometimes city crews unfortunately have to come out and flip that sign down when there's water on both sides. Over the years, the city has attempted to implement, I would say, smaller scale and creative types of solutions that haven't been very effective in actually reducing the recurrence and the severity of the flooding at that location. So this property would be an excellent site for a potential future flow control facility to help manage all the water that's coming down the hill from North City to the east. So we are currently working on that acquisition. We had to slow things down a little bit, but I think we're still in the process of trying to acquire it. And that's all I can say. I'll say one more thing, that we're working on a project that was already going to be recommended in the surface water master plan. And of course, we have to do all of our full prioritization of the new project. So I can't say this project is going to rise to the top, but I think it's very promising as a priority capital project. So the fact that this property is available potentially, and we have a project and a need in this area, I think it's going to it would be an excellent place for a stormwater facility, and that's what we're going for. And we could probably use it for art and a potential little public space like we have at the pump station 26. So that's I don't want to overpromise. I'd rather underpromise and overdeliver. But those are some of the ideas that we're kicking around. Any more questions?
I'm not seeing anything from the chat. Any more on the chat or from the room? They can't hear me unless I talk into the mic. I think it's different for you all. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for your time and your attention. And thanks to Christy.
Thank you.